Hello, I'm Nicky Francis, and I'm really happy to be here today. First of all, I want to thank the British Council for inviting me to be part of this talk and this celebration of 10 years of collaboration. I also want to thank the UCAB for hosting this event today and allowing me to share my experiences. Also, UNEM and UCV for all the organization involved in these celebrations. So my talk today, Let Them Talk, designing lessons that build real communication in any language. Um, and I have a lot of experience, and in my opinion, and I'm sure most of you agree, our own experiences as language learners are crucial and vital to understanding our own learners, because if we understand our own learners, then we're one step to designing effective lessons for them. And we're all language learners. So my first question to you is to think about how, do you remember how it feels to learn a new language? And if you can get yourself back in that mindset and that space of how you felt when you were learning a new language, you're one step to understanding how your learners in your classrooms are feeling. So let me share my experience of when I was learning French. I moved to Paris when I was 23 in 1991, very long time ago. And you can see a couple of photos here. The photo on the left is of me with my younger brother and my two parents, and sitting in a typical brasserie in Paris. And the photo on the right is of me with my younger sister. She's much taller than me, but she's my younger sister. And we're standing on the steps of Montmartre sightseeing. So she came to visit me, and we were sightseeing. So I arrived in Paris at 23, and I didn't know French. I'd studied French in school from the age of 11 to 16. But from the age of 16 to 23, when I arrived in Paris, nothing, no French at all. So I arrived in this country with with very, very basic understanding of French. And I started working as a jeune fille pair, and then I started working in a hotel. And this experience in the hotel was a bit of a game changer, and it's always something that I remember quite distinctly, and I remember how it made me feel as a language learner. So I was working in a hotel, a five-star hotel right in the center of Paris, and I was working in the room service and didn't understand. Nobody spoke English. I was the only English speaker there, and my French was minimal, to say the least. And I can remember one of the chefs. I was working the room service, had to prepare the breakfast trays in the morning, and I can remember one of the chefs screaming, "Passe-moi le couteau, passe-moi le couteau," every morning. I really don't understand what he's talking about. Passe-moi le couteau, and all these gestures, and he would hold up a knife. I was like, ah. He wants me to pass him a knife, so I would pass him the knife. And then this would be on repeat. So the next day he'd scream again, Nicky, passe-moi le couteau. I'm like, ah, tiens, here's the knife. So I would little by little I would learn from this full immersive experience of language learning where I had to communicate. I had to understand, and I had to communicate, and I had to understand what people were communicating to me just to survive my job and on a for my daily routines and just living there. So it was a real eye opener to what it's like to be a language learner. And ultimately, this is what we would try to emulate in our classroom, like real communication that happens in the real world. So what is communication? What do we mean by communication? Well, yes, it's an exchange of information. It can be data, information. It can be opinions, thoughts, feelings, emotions, going from one person to another. There's a sender and there's a receiver. So one person is giving the message, and the other person is hopefully receiving the message. So there has to be at least two people in this process of communication. And how do we communicate? Well, many forms of communication. In our classrooms, we're hoping to encourage our students to speak, like verbal communication, but they're all forms of communication. There's verbal, but there's also writing. We want to encourage our students to write, to communicate through writing as well, but also body language and electronic media. When I Googled the word communication, um, to find some images, in fact, all like 95% of the images that came up were people holding devices in their hands. So communication is changing, has changing, but it's still the same process of exchange of information. But for me, the most important thing, how do we know that communication has happened? There's understanding. There is absolutely some sort of meaningful communication, and the meaning has got across. So the message is understood, and there's a mutual understanding of what is happening. So let's go back to my experience of Passe-moi le couteau. There definitely was an exchange going on of information. The chef, it was an imperative, telling me what he wanted, giving me the order, as it were. There were two people, and I think here we need to note as well that obviously we're talking about verbal communication and communicating a message, but obviously listening is so vital as well in communication, because there is a sender and there is a receiver. So I was listening to the message, and he was definitely giving me his message. And how did he communicate this message? He communicated it verbally by screaming. We don't have to scream in our classrooms, but verbally. But also, he used gestures, he used realia, he used the knife to show me, to actually show me. So, this again, we can do this in our classrooms. We can use gestures, we can use sign language, we can use realia to help our students. And hopefully, and the meaning definitely did get across. Why? Because he used all these different forms of communication, but also because he kept repeating it over and over again. And each day I would go back and it would be the same messaging, it would be the same phrase. And so little by little, I was hearing the message, I was listening, I was hearing. So then eventually I was able to produce myself and to communicate myself, and passe-moi le couteau, and then it became passe-moi la cuillère, or passe-moi la fourchette, or passe-moi l'assiette, and little by little I could assimilate this language into my French vocabulary. So I've always thought that looking at things so understanding our learners is really important. So it's about looking at things from a different perspective. The chef was looking at me from his perspective, and I was coming from my perspective. If you're trying to understand your learners, there's more than one person in front of you in that classroom. You could have 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 maybe students, and they're coming at the situation from a completely different perspective. So it's about being open-minded and trying to remember that everybody is looking from a different perspective. You can see this image on the slide. There were two people standing with a blue board in the middle on the right-hand side. There's a figure, maybe a woman, wearing a red jumper and a blue trousers, and she's looking from her perspective, and she can see the number 66. But the same board, a man standing on the left-hand side wearing yellow jumper, blue trousers, and he can see the number 99. So the same image, the same board, but the information is being received differently from different perspectives. So I think it's really important that as teachers that we understand that there are different perspectives, and just because you give out one message, what's being received is not necessarily the same for everybody. So it's really important to take a step back and try and think about how your learners are feeling. So think about a time when you tried to speak a new language and you really needed to be understood. Like the chef really wanted me to understand, and little by little he made me understand. So how did that make you feel? And how do you think you succeeded in getting and communicating and getting your message across? I think this is really important for us to reflect as teachers, so that we can design the best lessons for our students. This is how I felt when I was learning French. I felt like I just didn't have the words, I didn't have the vocabulary to express myself. So in the classroom, this would translate, I guess, to having a vocabulary rich environment with maybe posters and giving opportunities to your students to see the language and hear the language, as much vocabulary as possible, because they need the words to remember what it's like when you're a language learner. You just don't have the words. I really needed to understand, and I can remember going home every day having focused on trying to understand what people were saying to me and having a terrible headache because I was really trying to focus as I just wanted to understand what was being said. And also, I'm sure you've all been through this as well, where you that time lag where you think you've understood, or you think you've understood what's being said in the conversation, or somebody's communicating to you, but you can't find the words, and you need the time to get that phrase right to be able to produce it. And maybe the people have already gone on to the next subject or the next sentence, and it's too late, and it's even more frustrating. So think about that as well when you're designing the lessons for your students. Give them time to respond, because maybe there is a lot, you know yourself, there's a lot going on in your head when you're trying to understand and then find the words and formulate the sentence and then produce it. There's a lot going on. So give them time, give them time. And I felt very frustrated when I couldn't express myself. And I think that was one of the first words that I really remember was frustrant, which means frustrating in French. And it really was frustrating. So all these different things made me, in fact, more determined. So this is how I succeeded in the end. I mean, I was more determined to learn more words. So I just said to myself, okay, I'm lucky to be living in France, to be in this immersive environment, but I needed to immerse myself in the French language. So started only reading in French, little baby books and newspapers, but easy articles, and watching films only in French, just to hear as much language as I could. And it made me more motivated to learn. And I lost my fear. And I threw myself into conversations, and I made mistakes, and that's how we learn. We make mistakes. So making sure that your students are aware that they can make mistakes, because that's ultimately how they're going to learn. So here are a few tips. So looking at it from a learner's point of view, the environment is crucial. The minute that your students are the space that they're in, they need to feel safe. They need that confidence to be able to speak, to be able to understand, and to be able to speak in this foreign language. And they need to be motivated. So as teachers, there are many things that we can do to create this safe, positive learning environment. The classroom layout itself can create this harmonious positive learning environment. The way the classroom is set out, trying to put your students in pairs or in groups so they can work together, so they're not isolated, and they really feel supported by setting the context, by maybe giving them an image, or telling them a story, personalizing the lesson. If you throw an image onto the screen, just to set the context so they know, so they're not just thrown into, okay, we have to speak now. And you can ask your students, how many words, what is this image about? What words do you know? And you can little by little start sort of activating that schemata that they have, to see what language they have already. And that will make them even more confident, because they realize that they already know something about what is going to be discussed in the lesson. That will help you as a teacher as well, to be able to design your lessons more effectively, because you can already see from your learners, they know this, but this is where I need to give them more vocabulary and more support. And to be inclusive, to try to create different activities, to be inclusive, to make sure that all your learners feel safe, and secure and supported within your classroom. So let's think about what sort of topics. So what sort of topics do you like to talk about with your friends and family? If we're thinking about this from the two sides of the coin of the teachers and the learners using us as a benchmark, in fact, for to understand our learners as language learners, like what sort of topics do you like to talk about with your friends and family? I mean, I like to talk about teaching and about my children and their education, about cinema. I love going to the theatre, so I often go to the theatre and arts. So these are all things that I like to talk about. The English like to talk about the weather a lot as well. And I've asked a few of my Venezuelan teachers what their students like to talk about, and a lot of them said to me, well, they don't like to talk about anything. But a lot of them said to me they love talking about AI. So here are topics like ask your students, get them involved. What sort of topics do they want to talk about? Because if you throw a topic that they're really not interested in, I mean, do you want to talk about something that bears no interest to you whatsoever? It's much more difficult to listen to somebody talking about something you're not interested in than it is to something that really drags your attention. So your learners are exactly the same. What about these images? Do you think that these images would get your learners talking? Have a look. There's the women's Venezuelan football team on the left. There's a Venezuelan festival in the middle. And on the right hand side, there's a photo of a young girl who has a disability with her arm, who's riding it, who has a horse, so she's a horse rider. And so let me tell you a little story about this one because um, when I was teaching in the British Council in Paris, Paris Teaching Centre, I had a wonderful group of teenagers, and they were it was only girls. In fact, it was a class of like just 10 girls. So I was very lucky. It was a really wonderful class. And in one of the course books that we were studying, there was a video that they had to watch. And halfway through the video, I paused because there was a questions just to see whether they were understanding. So I paused the video. So, okay, let's have some comprehension questions now. And as I paused the video, it paused on this image of this young girl riding with her disabled arm. And one of the girls in the class was so taken aback, she sort of recoiled in shock and horror at this image, this frozen image on the screen. And in this class, her twin sister, they were all between the age of about 12 and 14. And in this class, her twin sister was there and she was horrified at her sister's reaction. And I thought, okay, it wasn't part of the comprehension questions, as it were, the actual planned lesson. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. There's something happening here. So I just let them talk. I just let them talk. And they talked in English, and I helped them with some of the language that they needed to express themselves. And for about 20 minutes, they had a discussion on why she'd reacted like this and why she felt like this. And her sister and the other students, they all discussed a little, came to understanding there was no judgment on why she'd reacted, that shouldn't react like this, or she should react. There was no should or shouldn't. And little by little, we came to the conclusion that this was not, she was not used to seeing people with disabilities in Paris in her daily life. And so she was just taken aback and she was just shocked, and it was a natural reaction. So then instead of carrying on with the lesson, I brought in my own personal experience of knowing somebody who had a disability and who had become he was a famous photographer, war photographer. And so we just went on to a different subject. So really, real communication is when your students have some sort of emotion and opinion to share. So go with them, let them talk, and then go with them, and there the real communication will happen. So don't be afraid to pick topics that might get them emotionally involved, in fact. So make your learners active participants. They want to be involved. They want to talk about themselves and their interests, etc. So choosing the correct the topics that they want to talk about. So ask them for their ideas. I remember when I was training as a teacher, I was doing my diploma, and I was on one of the classes that I had to do research on. They were only 7-year-olds, and one of the reports, as it were, or the research projects was to ask your students what topics they wanted to study. And I thought, well, they're seven. I'm not going to ask 7-year-olds what they want to study, but actually I did because it was part of my diploma, and it was really that again was another eye-opening experience for me. It's like, yes, everybody has an opinion, and even 7-year-olds are like, we like studying like this, we like doing this, we don't like doing this, we like doing songs, but we don't like doing too many songs. Actually, they really like writing, they really like working on their own. So we were always taught to make them work in pairs and groups all the time, but actually they're like, we like having exercises where we have to think and we have quiet on our own. So ask them for their ideas and give them choices. So do you want to work in pairs or groups or on your own today? And be inclusive. If some of them want to work alone, let them work alone. So you can give them two or three choices, so that they feel even more motivated and involved, and offer them different ways to engage. Maybe some don't want to speak. Maybe they're shy or they're timid, but they know the language, but they're just not ready to communicate verbally. So maybe they would write, or maybe if it was a presentation, there could be four people within the group, and one is speaking, and one is designing the poster, and then one is pointing or something. They have different roles, but they're still engaged in the activity. So creating purposeful, realistic tasks, because how many times do you think your learners are like, what's the point of this? Why is this important? Why are we talking about this? It's really not interesting, and there's no point to it. So, going back to my pasmalakuto experience, there was a purpose. The chef needed that knife to cut whatever he needed to cut, but there was a purpose in that. So trying to make sure that they're solving a problem. So the communicative activities that you come up with, are they solving a problem? Is there something where they have to discuss? They have to find a solution. Is it something that will help them outside of the classroom? Is it a life skill that will help them in the future? One of my Venezuelan teachers said, my students love talking about what they're going to do in the future. So maybe different skills or life skills that they will have to do. So maybe that could be that's more purposeful for them. And of course, always be there supporting and scaffolding them, because how many times, remember when you were alone, it's like, "Oh, I don't understand." How many times have you heard your learn, I don't understand? They're probably saying it in Spanish, but I don't understand, or I can't find the words, I can't remember how to say it, or I'm so embarrassed, I'm embarrassed. That's what maybe what they're feeling. They might not be saying it. So yes, so model, you are the teacher. So let them talk, but also you talk. It's good too. It's you're the model. They need to hear the language. So they can't reproduce the language if they don't hear it. So you be confident to speak, and you can model the activity with one of the strongest students. Use images, use realia, use gestures, use all those different forms of communication, so that they can really understand, and then give them time, as I said at the beginning, give them time, and give them lots and lots and lots of opportunities to speak and make mistakes, as many opportunities to speak as possible. So here's a quick quiz. It won't be very interactive like this, but you can imagine being with me doing these activities. So think back to when you're a language learner as well, it will help you. So how many new words do you think you can teach in each lesson? Is it 4, 8, or 15? How many do you think your learners can actually you can teach? Yes, it's about 8. So if you bombard the 4 is maybe too few, but 15 is too many. That's bombarding them with too many new words. But 8, about 8 new words. Then question 2, how many times do you think a learner must hear a new word or phrase before they can remember it and then produce it? So 3, 10, or 25. So it's actually around 10 times. So it's a lot. in fact. So all that drilling is really important, and not just teaching on one day and thinking, well, I've already done that. I did that yesterday, so we need to move on because in the book we need to move on. No, they need to hear it. How many times did I need to hear passe-moi le couteau before then I could, passe-moi le couteau, passe-moi la cuillère. We need to hear it a lot. Some more than others. We're all different. So some more than others. So what about a dyslexic learner? How many times do you think a dyslexic learner needs to hear? 10, 40, or 75? It's actually about 40 times. So again, being aware, understanding your learners, who's in your classroom. If you have dyslexic learners, they will need more. They will need to hear that word more. So you can't, there has to be equity within your classroom and it has to be inclusive. So using inclusive strategies like giving them steps rather than and modeling and allowing them to hear that much, much more than the other students. And do early years and primary learners need to see a new word first, or do they need to hear it? Yeah, they need to hear it. They need to hear it. They can't read. And sometimes reading may, especially in English, it's not phonetic like Spanish. So they need to hear they need to hear how it sounds so they can pronounce it correctly before they read it. So the last thing, as learners, that often we think, I'm never going to learn this language. I mean, gave up on Spanish, I must admit. I tried. I need to get back into it. But you sort of come to a point like I'm never going to learn this. I can't remember anything we did last lesson. It's just what is going on. So we have to help our learners to notice their progress, and this will really help when we're designing our lessons. Build in that reflection period into your lesson, so there can be a real communicative activity where they think about um, how many words they learned and what they can remember and how many words from last time, etc. It can be your own reflective activity, however it is, but that really is a purposeful communicative activity. And you as a teacher reflect too. So be looking all the time who spoke and who didn't and who looked lost. And this will help you for your designing your future lessons. And this, I think, is very important that the aha moment is amazing when you see it in your students. Um, I think for me, when I started my language learning aha moment was when I started reading, when I forced myself just to read, and I realized that I would see words written on a page and words I'd thought I'd heard as one word. I saw actually four words all joined together. So there are lots of aha moments that you will have, that students will have, and so think about what we can do to help our students to for that click. So this is one of my favorite quotes. So from Maya Angelou, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think really, if if students feel that they can express their opinions and their emotions and they feel safe and secure, and it's an inclusive, positive learning environment, then you'll get them much more easily to communicate um, in your classroom. So thank you. Please stay in touch. Here's my email, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening or day or morning. Take care. Bye bye.